Welcome to Uncensored Beat.
I showed up. US citizen is not permitted entry.
Over the next big attack.
Zelensky's seemingly fraudulent election.
Bilateral security agreement President Joe Biden signed.
Quebec, the communist capital of North America.
Tonight on Ukraine Uncovered, we dive into a story straight out of a spy thriller, but it's all too real. Oleg Kulinich, a top Ukrainian security official, sits behind bars accused of treason during the Russia's 2022 invasion. Was he a traitor who betrayed his nation?
Or a patriot framed by a web of corruption stretching from Kiev to Washington, D.C. As Ukraine fought for survival, Kulinich was cast as the villain, but shocking evidence suggests he was targeted for exposing dark secrets shared between Ukraine and the US.
Join us as we unravel a tale of falsified documents, sinister players, a shadow government, and a justice system under fire. This is Ukraine Uncovered.
February 2022, Russian forces storm Ukraine, seizing Kherson. Amid the chaos, one man is singled out, Oleg Kulinich, head of SBU in Crimea. The State Bureau of Investigation, or SBI, accuses him of treason, claiming he failed to warn Ukraine's leaders of the invasion. How did Kulinich achieve this? Per Ukraine's SBI, Kulinich joined a small band of pro-Russian moles. According to SBI sources, together this team successfully infiltrated the depths of the Ukrainian government to weaken it in preparation of a Russian occupation.
С той стороны все боятся. Украина это сегодня хуже, чем Россия намного в Америке. Это нарицательное имя сильно. Для того, чтобы это все контролировать и четко различать, где арсена, где не арсена, где то, где это, нужно регионы. Нужно, если у него своих замов нет, то нужны регионы. Понимаешь?
The SBI's case hinges on a report they wrote alleging Kulinich suppressed critical intelligence. But a newly released video of the SBU team overseeing the evidence paints a different picture. The accusation was slander.
Enter Darya Kupastina, an SBI investigator whose actions raise questions. In June of 2022, she orders a search of a Kyiv apartment and SBU safe house where a mysterious USB drive is found.
In July 2022, big news broke. Allegedly, the special operation of intelligence and technical infiltration was defeated by the FSB. The main evidence is a flash drive with supposedly secret information. Yes, the city of Kiev, June 20, 2022, 162 minutes. Not June 20, as stated, but July 10th, 20 days after the event. This flash drive was not recognized as physical evidence. There is no original audio. There is no device on which the recordings were allegedly made. There is no authenticity. All that exists is a copy, and what's worse, editing a copy. After the pre-trial investigation was completed, the prosecutor's office suddenly recognized this flash drive as physical evidence, but it was no longer relevant to the case. Is this how to add material evidence after a verdict? She has nothing, yes. There is no way. In general, there are no things, no.
Что бывает и такое, знаете, как? Я сейчас письмо, давайте так.
Шикарно.
На камерку на меня. Да, вы вообще...
think this is just a story about a flash drive? No, this is a story of seizing influence. This is a story of a security service takeover. It started with a fabricated ruling by investigator Judge Ford, the one who has repeatedly appeared in criminal proceedings, the one who was part of Portnoy's corruption vertical. A person was illegally deprived of their liberty. Her honest name was discredited. Decades of worthy work destroyed over one lie. The public was also lied to. That is why they closed trials. That is why they're putting pressure on lawyers. That is why they're persecuting defense attorneys. All this is not just falsification of evidence. It is a special operation against the leadership of SBU. What was the goal? To discredit the then leader, Ivan Bakanov, take his place and take control of the service. That is, to seize the structure responsible for national security. This was presented to the president as a real special operation. He was told that he was allegedly personally supervising the development process. The medium itself was empty. All the files that were there were restored later. Audio-video files that supposedly prove the infiltration have been edited. There are no original recordings, no recording devices. All examinations are not based on the flash drive, but on its copy. This USB mentioned in the SBI investigations contains restored audio files linking Kulinich to Russian operative Vladimir Siskovich. But Kulinich's lawyer, Andrei Nakhon, states the SBI have not offered the original files, and the recording's authenticity remains unverified.
Прописані у нього в обвинувальному акті, тим більше до державної зради, коли прокурор прекрасно розуміє походження цих доказів, а саме цього флеш-носія, бо саме флеш-носій, на який ми посилаємося, і про це вже пишуть ЗМІ, був єдиною підставою затримання Кулініча. На цьому флеш-носії, який був віднайдено в іншому кримінальному провадженні, не щодо Кулініча, не проти Кулініча, не в рамках якоїсь негласних розшукових слідчих дій, не в рамках контррозвідувальних заходів проти Кулініча, а випадково його знайшли під час обшуку в іншому кримінальному провадженні. Я можу навіть його назвати, тут воно написано, воно має завершення на 00148, зареєстровано 17 березня 2022 року. В рамках цього кримінального провадження було знайдено флеш-носій у пустій квартирі в місті Києві. Дана квартира, за версією слідства, нібито використовувалась особами, які сприяли Російській Федерації веденню війни проти України. Флешка була пустою, але її експерти дуже швидко дослідили і відновили, нібито видалені на ній файли. І серед видалених файлів, які були відновлені експертами, було віднайдено нібито записи розмов Кулініча із громадянином України Сівковичем. Ці докази, ця флешка дуже швидко, там було 3 дні чи 4 на витребування матеріалів справи, на проведення експертиз через вихідні дні. Флешку експерт-ували 4 дні, 2 дні, і серед них було 2 дні вихідних. Здійснили оцінку матеріалів на цьому флеш-носії і сказали, що... А виявляється, на флеш-носії були не тільки аудіозаписи розмов, а ще й стенограми. Хтось дбайливо зробив стенограми розмов нібито Кулініча, нібито Сівковича, позначивши їх буковками К і С. От так все склалося, що можна було отримати такий доказ, як джекпот. Прокурор знає про те, яким доказом фактично інкримінується Кулінічу нібито його державна зрада. Причому наголошую, що початково і при затриманні Кулінічу казали, що він здав Південь, що він сприяв саме в здачі Півдня саме в лютому 2022 року. З того часу нічого цього всього не підтвердилось, і тільки от 16 липня це відбулося. І от, знаючи прокурор про той факт, як реєструвалася справа, ким, коли, на основі чого, про що реєструвалася справа, і яким чином в подальшому з'явилися докази, основний єдиний доказ проти Кулініча, і фактично дав той доказ підстави його затримувати і встановити, а чи немає раптом тих обставин та підстав, що в діях Кулініча немає складу злочину, яким інкримінується. Адже записи на флешці чітко пронумеровані по датах і вказується, що це 19-й рік. А Кулініч в 19-му році не був співробітником Служби безпеки України, а отже, він і не міг чинити державну зраду. Став працювати тільки в 20-му році.
SBU Chief Vasyl Malyuk claims these files prove Kulinich's guilt, boasting of a filigree operation infiltrating Russia's FSB. But our investigation uncovers procedural violations, questionable evidence, and a rush to judgment.
Who stood to gain from silencing Kulinich? And why does this case echo far beyond Ukraine's borders? Oleg Kulinich wasn't just any SBU officer, an international financial crime expert. He worked with U.S. officials under the Obama administration to combat global corruption. He also ran investigations under the first Trump administration to stop corruption in U.S. foreign aid, like USAID. His dissertation exposed sophisticated money laundering schemes tied to international elites, governments, and corporations. In 2016, Kulinich joined a U.S.-Ukraine task force, uncovering financial crimes implicating powerful figures, including those linked to Burisma, the energy company tied to Hunter Biden.
The Times states Hunter Biden wrote a letter to the U.S. ambassador to Italy in 2016 trying to get Burisma help for a lucrative geothermal energy project in Tuscany. The Times obtained documents from the State Department that reveal embassy officials in Italy were uneasy with the vice president's son requesting help on behalf of a foreign company. A Commerce Department official based in Rome ultimately responded by saying, "I want to be careful about promising too much. This is a Ukrainian company, and purely to protect ourselves, the U.S. government should not be actively advocating with the government of Italy without the company going through the Department of Commerce Advocacy Center."
This also includes a recent discovery suggesting his work exposing possible illegal transactions related to the 2016 presidential race. His work made enemies fast.
There is significant evidence that it may have been wider in scope. Last year on One American News, we interviewed Ukrainian embassy whistleblower Andrei Telezhenko. Telezhenko claims that the real sources behind the Fusion GPS Steele dossier included anti-Trump Ukrainian politicians. Later testimony from a Fusion GPS employee has confirmed that. We also reported on the fact that Ukrainian-American Alexandra Chalupa was paid over $400,000 by the DNC in years leading up to 2016 and worked closely with the Ukrainian embassy.
One target was Andrei Portnov, a Ukrainian official accused of corrupting the judiciary. Kulinich's investigation led to the U.S. sanctions against Portnov in 2020. But in Ukraine, Portnov allies like Oleg Tatarov, deputy chief staff to President Zelensky and head of law enforcement for all of Ukraine, remained untouchable.
Tatarov's access to the nation's law enforcement arm and close alliance to Portnov may explain the number of legal cases against Ukrainian officials and security officers like Oleg Kulinich.
Андрій Портнов – це не просто ім'я, це символ системи.
Я директор колгоспу, я важлива людина. У мене є колгосп, і я в ньому перше обличчя.
Аж таким благословенням у Портнова справи пішли вгору. У 2010-му він стає заступником голови адміністрації президента і фактично отримує золотий ключик від Міністерства юстиції та усієї судової системи країни. Стає головним прорабом корупційного будівництва.
Андрій призначав всіх суддів. Ну, він не призначав напряму, але кваліфікаційна комісія була під ним, і фактично значна частина суддів України була ним призначена.
Цікавого. Наприклад, що саме Портнов збудував витончену конструкцію, в якій суди не так шукали справедливість, здебільшого отримували команди з Банкової.
Потрібно кожного взяти і систематизувати всіх, хто займається протиправною діяльністю.
Система працювала як швейцарський годинник. Політичних опонентів під суд, незручні рішення у шредер, вигідні справи з потрібним вироком. Особливо добре, кажуть, йому вдавалися адміністративні процеси, там, де закон міг трошки поступитися інтересам влади. Ціна вирішення будь-якого питання – $10 мільйонів.
Kulinich backed Zelensky's populist rise, even serving on his security detail. But by 2020, as Zelensky's administration shifted, Kulinich was reassigned to head the SBU in Crimea. Was this a promotion or a setup?
In October of 2020, Ukraine's constitutional court, reportedly influenced by Portnov, gutted anti-corruption laws. 1 month later, Joe Biden won the United States presidency, and Burisma investigation stalled. Kulinich's crusade was hitting close to power.
Was Kulinich uncovering truths that threatened global elites?
A deeper look at the conversation between Trump and Zelensky in July of 2019 shows Trump mentioning the former ambassador and Zelensky agreeing with him. The question is, what were the two leaders agreeing about? Could this have anything to do with the investigations involving Kulinich?
Marie Yovanovitch, the ambassador in question, was able to offer some background when she testified at Trump's 2019 impeachment proceedings at the U.S. Congress.
I want to reiterate first that the allegation that I disseminated a do not prosecute list was a fabrication. Mr. Lutsenko, the former Ukrainian prosecutor general who made that allegation, has acknowledged that the list never existed. I did not tell Mr. Lutsenko or other Ukrainian officials who they should or should not prosecute. Instead, I advocated the U.S. position that rule of law should prevail, and Ukrainian law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges should stop wielding their power selectively as a political weapon against their adversaries and start dealing with all consistently and according to the law.
However, there was a news broadcast from The Hill that aired 6 months earlier, which gives a Ukrainian perspective.
It is true that I had some difficult personal relationship with Miss Ambassador. Unfortunately, from the first meeting with the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, Miss Ambassador gave me a list of people whom we should not prosecute. And my response was that it is inadmissible. Nobody in this country, neither our president, nor our parliament, nor ambassador, could stop me from prosecuting whether there is a crime.
You're saying that our ambassador, Ms. Yovanovitch, came to you and told you people she did not want you to pursue even if there was evidence of criminality. Is that correct?
Yes. At that time we had a case for the embezzlement of the U.S. government technical assistance worth $4 million, and in that regard we had this dialogue.
The actions of the ambassador suggest influence outside the interest of U.S. and Ukraine heads of state at the time. A brief look into the history of Ukraine may provide answers.
The forming of Ukraine as a country at the end of the Cold War not only involved the nations of the Soviet Union and NATO, which included the U.S., but also it involved the Open Society, a foundation headed by George Soros. In Ukraine, the Open Society established a regional organization called the Renaissance Foundation. The impact of the Renaissance Foundation on the institutions and culture of Ukraine is vast. It encompasses media, news, and education. It even established the organization to address Ukraine's effort to end corruption, when in 2014 it created the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, or NABU, with support from the U.S. government under the Obama administration. The question remains, where was the NABU when Kulinich was arrested? The NABU was backed by both the U.S. government and the Open Society. Why did both remain silent about Kulinich's work to shut down a large corrupt network? Despite all of the history and evidence gathered, Kulinich's investigations remain locked up with him. Back to that USB drive found in an SBU safe house. It's said to link Kulinich and Siskovich, but the timeline doesn't add up. The recordings predate Kulinich's Crimea post, and the drive's origins remain murky.
Experts concluded the audio file's authenticity couldn't be confirmed. No original recordings, no recording device, no context. Yet SBU Chief Vasyl Malyuk used them to justify Kulinich's arrest on July 16, 2022.
Malyuk claimed he single-handedly discovered and exposed Kulinich to law enforcement, branding him a Russian agent. But our findings reveal procedural violations, questionable documents, and a complicit judiciary. Recently, testimonies were published from locals on the ground the day of the invasion in February 2022 that point to local law enforcement and military not assigned to Kulinich. These locals were tasked to secure and defend the area, but fled their posts. With SBU and SBI corruption prevalent, such tendencies may have taken advantage of Kulinich with the need to pin responsibility on someone under the dire circumstances of the invasion.
Meet Dennis Kavinko, the prosecutor on Kulinich's case. Watchdog groups call him an enabler of fabricated cases. Under his oversight, Kulinich's trial has stalled, with no formal treason charges filed nearly 3 years later.
Kulinich's legal team claims the judiciary is delaying to protect itself. It continues to do so despite recent protests during Kulinich's case appearance in May. Protesters urged the courts to assign the charge of treason against Kulinich. Yet, the courts decided to delay the ruling on why they are holding Kulinich in prison.
Why is the court hesitant to come up with a charge? The court could expose a corrupt system implicating prosecutors, SBU officials, and even Zelensky's inner circle. Kulinich's detention without charges violates Ukraine's constitution and European human rights standards. Yet, Western media remains largely silent. Why? The answer may come from a 2023 report issued by the Judiciary Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives, which scolded Zelensky. The problem? Unverified members of the Ukrainian SBU worked with the FBI to censor U.S. citizens on social media. News questioning Zelensky was tagged Russian infiltration and blocked. One account censored came from the U.S. DOJ.
Another clue to the media's silence is linked to the issues discovered with USAID funding into media outlets in Ukraine. In December 2022, Zelensky legalized media censorship in Ukraine. As Kulinich dug deeper into his investigations, the walls closed in. His enemies weren't just in Ukraine, they spanned continents. To Kulinich, globalism made these large criminal networks. He describes this problem in his PhD paper. Unfortunately for these criminals, Kulinich's successful work meant trouble. A recent Uncensored Beat study showed that around 123 Ukrainian media companies were funded by USAID under the Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance Media Program. These funds helped to support the censored media, promoting government-approved content. Findings show that some are funded by Soros's Renaissance Foundation. This scenario made it more difficult for Kulinich to share his story.
Next, are there other signs of efforts to silence Kulinich and hide his findings? Oleg Kulinich has survived 2 assassination attempts in prison. He remains silenced, his story suppressed. Official documents show he followed orders to move his team to Kyiv in February 2022, per an SBU directive issued a year earlier.
His lawyer, Andriy Nakhod, insists the USB evidence was planted, obtained outside legal protocols with no clear origin. Even Malyuk's codename explanations, calling the hunter Namov and others, were added without verification.
In May of 2022, the U.S. passed a bill allocating funds to investigate war crimes in Ukraine. 2 months later, Kulinich was arrested. Were these funds used to target a man who knew too much about U.S.-Ukraine financial ties?
FBI records released by Senator Chuck Grassley confirmed Kulinich's anti-corruption work involving U.S. and Ukrainian teams, which targeted Burisma and high-level U.S. figures. These new findings, buried in case files, clears Kulinich. It confirms he never received invasion warnings to suppress, acted within Ukraine's laws, and led counterintelligence efforts against Russia. So why was he arrested? 3 years after his arrest, Oleg Kulinich awaits formal charges. Ukraine's courts stall, prosecutors delay, and media, muted by censorship, barely covers his case.
As a nation, we have paid the cost of unfettered corruption supported and paid by the U.S. taxpayer. Kulinich's investigations may hold answers to the questions that can stop this illegal network and can potentially halt attempts to duplicate it once more.
Meanwhile, in Kiev, protesters demand justice, but Ukraine's judiciary fears the truth. Freeing Kulinich could expose a corrupt system and implicate those at the highest levels.
The warning given by Kulinich's lawyer suggests his client's imprisonment shields the guilty. His client's silence protects a network of corruption spanning Kyiv, Washington, and beyond. Ask him, does he feel his professional opinion? Does he feel these are orders coming from the Zelensky administration?
Насколько, скорее всего, происходит
How high it rises to the presidential administration, the president's office, I cannot answer. But the fact that this is controlled at the level of the prosecutor general's office is 100%, or the special services is 100%. Because according to Ukrainian law, eventually this case will be dissolved. That is, Kulinich, someday, in our opinion, will be found not guilty on all charges. The person who charged him, the one who signed the indictment documents, it's on him. He will have to bear legal responsibility for imprisoning Kulinich according to the current legislation. These are also serious legal charges in Ukraine. Nearly 10 years ago, Oleg Kulinich began his journey to combat corruption hand in hand with the U.S. He did it to support both Ukrainian and American interest. 3 years ago, his efforts landed him in jail without formal charges, only suspicions possibly based on falsified evidence. Where does the U.S. stand today with issues of international corruption that digs into the U.S. taxpayer wallet?
Have an executive order relating to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
And for those of you that know this, it turned out to be, it sounds good on paper, but in practicality, it's a disaster. It means that if an American goes over to a foreign country and starts doing business over there legally, legitimately, or otherwise, it's almost a guaranteed investigation, indictment, and nobody wants to do business with the Americans because of it. Nobody wants to do business. They say, look, we can deal with China, they can do whatever they want. We can deal with Russia, we can deal with anybody, and we have a normal life. You deal with America, the FBI gets over there. They don't investigate death and murders on the street in New York and Los Angeles. They go over and investigate a business guy trying to do business. So it made it very, very hard from a practical standpoint to make deals. They want to deal with the Americans, but they don't want to be under investigation every time they speak to American, every time an American makes a phone call to somebody in a different country. It's a disaster.
A clarification to Trump's executive order was made in February 2025. In a memo issued by Attorney General Pam Bondi, FCPA efforts would not stop entirely. Instead, Trump's executive order instituted a pause on all new FCPA cases submitted to the U.S. DOJ after a 180-day review of the policies. These policies were in the process of being changed to simplify the legal efforts. The purpose of the changes would be to remove blockades to international business with the U.S. and to focus on criminality. On June 9, 2025, U.S. Attorney General Bondi issued another FCPA memo. In this memo, the core focus of DOJ cases for FCPA violations would be, number 1, elimination of cartels and transnational organizations, 2, fair opportunities for U.S. companies, 3, U.S. national security, and 4, serious misconduct, which includes egregious misconduct allegations tied to corruption, especially those tied to bribery.
Developments out of Ukraine, the country is seeing its first major anti-government demonstrations since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion more than 3 years ago. Now, these protests started after lawmakers in Kyiv approved a bill that critics say weakens the independence of Ukraine's anti-corruption agency.
In a last-second move, the Ukrainian parliament rapidly drafted a bill to end the independence of the NABU and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, or SAPO. Although the NABU emerged with great influence from Soros organizations, it was considered free from Ukrainian politics. It was known to be influenced mainly by U.S. and EU interests. There are similar concerns about SAPO, which served as the legal arm of the NABU and represented their efforts in court. On July 23, 2025, President Zelensky signed this bill into law. This change placed both the NABU and SAPO's anti-corruption efforts under the full control of the Zelensky administration. Nearly a week later, the Ukrainian parliament and Zelensky reversed the decision under pressure from the EU. The quick turnaround with these laws are curious. Why was the original bill to fully control anti-corruption drafted, and why was it done now? Was this move in the interest of the people? Oleg Kulinich is more than a prisoner. He's a U.S. asset with secrets that could change everything. His fight for justice is ours. It's time to bring him to the U.S. Let him speak and demand accountability.
Join us. Demand Oleg Kulinich's freedom. The truth can't stay buried forever.
That's our story tonight on Ukraine Uncovered. Oleg Kulinich's fate hangs in the balance, but his case exposes a deeper truth. Corruption knows no borders.
Visit uncensoredbeat.com. This is James Bradley.
And I'm Flor Blanco.
Saying good
Good
night.
Welcome to Uncensored Beat.
I showed up. U.S. citizen is not permitted entry.
Cover the next big attack.
Zelensky's seemingly fraudulent election.
Bilateral security agreement President Joe Biden signed.
Quebec, the communist capital of North America.
What do Ukrainians think about US? Some believe that the US is to blame for this war.